welcome to Incentive Management Group's interview series. For 25 years, we have been helping corporations to reduce costs for CapEx and improve ROI through state incentives. We have also helped corporations to increase their training and reduce the cost of training through state training grants. In our interview series, we talk with people who are in key positions across industries and business segments. We offer this series to enhance the breadth of our knowledge so that we may better serve our clients. And then we share these interviews with you, our audience, to enhance your knowledge of business segments you're not exposed to every day. Today, my guest is Charles Goulding. Well, good morning, Charles. Thanks for sharing some time with us today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Marty. Nice to see you.
A lot of my audience is interested in what the interviewees are businesses are like. So, tell me about your business. You have two, actually, I think. Tell me about each one. What are their target audiences? What services do you provide? And most importantly, what are the benefits that you bring to your clients?
Yeah, the two businesses that we have, one is called Energy Tax Savers. That business, we help commercial property owners obtain tax incentives for energy efficiency in three areas: energy efficient lighting, HVAC, and then the building envelope, which would be an improved roof, walls, doors, insulation. There's also an interesting beneficiary category with that business, which is architects and engineers and retrofitters working on government buildings. If they're working on a government building, the government, of course, doesn't pay taxes, but then the tax incentive goes to the design community. And that's a big practice for us. So if a school architect makes a school more efficient, the school architect can get a tax incentive. Our second business is called R&D Tax Savers. And in that business, we help businesses that are innovating get a tax credit to support their innovation. And innovation can be a new and improved product, a new and improved process. And almost every company we work on today is doing something with newer, improved software to make their business run better. The common denominator, although we're a tax firm and I'm an attorney CPA, so a traditional tax background, and we have other attorneys and CPAs, most of our team is comprised of engineers. So in both practices, we're at the intersection of tax and engineering.
Well, it's maybe apparent to most. What do you see the benefit that you bring, or benefits that you bring to your clients?
Okay. Well, for energy projects, someone who wants to make an investment in an energy project will base that investment in most cases by economic return. They want to get a payback on their investment. And general standard for most folks in commercial buildings is they want to get a 2 to 3 year payback when they make an energy reducing investment. So the energy reduction itself is going to give them economic payback. Often they can get a rebate from a utility or another authority. And then tax savings is the icing on the cake. We call it layering the cake, meaning if you put all three together, the energy savings, the rebate, the tax savings, you can often get the economic justification to make a project go forward. So we're helping projects get completed. And then on the R&D tax credits side, when companies are developing a new product or a new process, they're making an investment out of their pocket. It's something they want to do to improve their business. And once again, it can enhance the economic payback and help a company justify a project. Through the years, we've seen many situations where a company will look at an R&D investment and see that it's a 3.5 year payback or a 4 year payback. And often the tax savings can get them to the 3 year or lower year payback, which again will justify a project.
Most people think of R&D as, as a component of the building where a bunch of people sit and do specifically development work and so forth. But your definition of R&D as it relates to the R&D tax credit is much broader.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Often when people hear the term R&D, they kind of think of white lab coat kind of stuff, which this credit, of course, encompasses. But this is a credit enacted in 1981 when Congress was concerned about competitiveness, but particularly at that time, Japan. The Japanese had just purchased Rockefeller Center and Pebble Beach, and Toyotas and Nissans were selling strongly. And Congress said, what should we do to make ourselves more competitive? There was recognition that our neighbor Canada had an R&D credit. So this credit was enacted to help commercial businesses doing, commercial projects. And the whole idea is to create employment. So this credit is much broader than white lab coat kinds of things. So today it would encompass robotics and automation in warehouses. That's a big item today. Just as an example that I don't think most people think about when they first hear the word R&D.
Speaking of Toyota in Japan and competitiveness and so forth, brings to mind that the Toyota production system, which is now in the US, described lean, continuous improvement, Six Sigma, all of those methodologies and so forth. We have a lot of consultants, and a lot of the work that they do, you and I have talked about, is process improvement, and their work, the cost of their work and related cost of employing the people who are part of that process, all of that can be considered as well. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a very important point. When the R&D credit first came out in 1981, and I actually did my initial R&D credit work in 1981, we really thought about the product side, and that was easier to identify. And then as we got better at it, we realized that there was just as much innovation, and in some industries, more innovation occurring on the process side. That's been a very fertile area and a great, opportunity area to expand the R&D credit.
So let's switch gears for a second and talk about early years of Charles Goulding. You were in big corporations. It wasn't until, I guess, 16 years or so ago that you actually co-founded or whatever. We'll talk about that in a minute, but tell me about the early part of your career.
When I came out of law school, which was during the 74, 75 recession, it was a very difficult job market. And I had watched my classmates in front of me have a tough time getting jobs. But for the graduating attorneys that had accounting backgrounds or had engineering backgrounds. And I felt that I might be able to learn the accounting side. So in my last 2 years of law school, I took accounting courses in the summer. Actually, my last year of law school, I was ahead of myself. So I went to law school during the day and business school at night so that I could be eligible to be hired by one of the big accounting firms. So I started with one of the big accounting firms, and then I went to a client called Dover Corporation, a large manufacturer. I was very fortunate, to be honest with you. When I joined, the company had 6,000 employees and 300 million in sales. And 26 years later, it had 8 billion in sales and 32,000 employees. So the company wound up engaging in 50 different major business areas, including electronics and aerospace and packaging, oil and gas equipment. So that was an incredible experience that gave me an opportunity to look inside, many, many businesses. And I became a vice president at Dover Corporation. And then when I left Dover, I became the managing director of Cooper Industries, now Eaton Cooper. And that was good because that was also a big company, but particularly focused on electrical, power transmission, transformers, and it had a big tool business. So I got the opportunity to get inside of some other major industrial business categories. And that wound up a very good foundation, better than I ever anticipated when I started these two businesses, because it translates a lot better when you talk to a particular company in a particular industry and you have had some experience in that industry. So, for example, Dover had a very large $1 billion elevator business, and now we have 4 elevator clients because industry vertical, they're comfortable that this firm knows something about my industry. It worked out very well.
What was the trigger that caused you to move from a big corporation to your own business?
Yeah, if you look at industrial America, if you go back probably into the 1950s or 1960s, New York, where I'm from, was the headquarters of many leading industrial companies. But over time, most of the industrial companies relocated to other areas, particularly to be in the center of the US economy. So a lot of companies went to Dallas, Houston, Chicago, Atlanta. So the bottom line is I had really two choices. If I was going to stay in corporate America, I would have had to have relocated. And once I got into my mid 50s, I got set in my ways, to be honest with you. And I wasn't interested in relocating. Well, my children were young adults, and I just wasn't predisposed to moving. Dover moved to Chicago, and Eaton wound up in Cleveland. So that's why I decided to start my own business.
One of the things that we didn't talk about with regard to your business is the amount of work that you have to do to support the end result, which is achieving those cost savings for your clients. Tell us in a couple of minutes, give us a description of the process that's involved in achieving the identification of all of the activity in a corporation that gets those tax savings.
Yeah, that's a good question. When you deal with tax provisions and tax incentives, they're very procedural. So one has to demonstrate that they've met the prescribed requirements. So for both our practices, we, and actually by statute, we have to prepare reports. So in order to prepare those reports, we have to obtain data. So if it's a lighting project, we have to know what kind of new fixtures were put in, how many fixtures, what are the wattage of those fixtures. If it's HVAC, we have to know the model of the equipment being put in and the energy performance characteristics of that particular equipment. And then we have to run what's called an energy model, which is a pretty complicated piece of software where we have to input all the data related to the lighting system room by room, all the data related to the HVAC system, and then all the data related to the building envelope, which is commonly, most people would call it insulation, we call it fenestration. What's the thickness and energy characteristic of the roof, walls, doors, windows? So a lot of data goes into this computer model. And then the model has to demonstrate that a particular energy savings is achieved. And engineering modeling, it normally can only be performed by very experienced engineers. Generally, junior engineers do not know how to do this work. You need experience to be able to do this. And the same thing on the R&D credit side. Our government actually requires what the government calls contemporaneous documentation. The rest of us would call it a report. The contemporaneous documentation has to show that 4 tests have been met, and that includes, a project description, and we have to document that there was a process of experimentation, that there was an examination of alternatives, and we do that by interviewing some of the key people at each company. We're normally interviewing project managers, designers, engineers, software developers. We're normally interviewing technical people doing technical things.
So one of the questions that people that listen to these interviews have expressed an interest in is, because a lot of the people that we talk to are entrepreneurs or have interesting backgrounds. But the question is, what's it like to be Charles Goulding, the businessman, and then alternatively, what's it like to be Charles Goulding, the person, the family man, the guy who spends his time doing something interesting, or at least something that you find interesting?
Yeah, well, I've actually been, I think, very fortunate. My wife and I have 3 children. I actually met my wife in junior high school. So I think you and I have talked before, Marty, but we have a 45-year marriage. So that's been nice.
Highly unique.
One thing I like about the business that I'm in charge of is that we have a lot of young engineers.
Yes.
They're very bright. They have diverse backgrounds. We have chemical engineers, electrical, 4 biomedical engineers. We have industrial process engineers, and they're all very bright young people. About 50% of our firm are female engineers. And I enjoy the opportunity to work with today's young people. Contrary to some things you hear sometimes, I find the young people today are very, very bright. They have tremendous computer skills, and they're a joy. I enjoy working with them, and I find that quite interesting. And then, on the personal, this way you want to talk about some personal stuff?
Yeah, tell me about you.
Yeah. Well, I am the mayor of our small local community, which has 750 homes, no businesses. I was deputy mayor for probably almost 10 years and became mayor 4 years ago. So that's, very interesting. I get a bird's eye view of how local government performs. I have a 14-person police department that reports to me. So I've learned a lot about policing. With all of the rain we've had in the East Coast recently, I've learned an awful lot about drainage and drainage problems. So that's an interesting thing to participate in. In terms of personal activities, I play golf and tennis. I play tennis Thursday nights and Sundays, and I'd probably go to 10 or 15 golf outings a year. I like both sports.
Yeah.
Because we live on the coast, I don't have a boat, but I have many friends that have boats. So I'm frequently a guest on boat trips, and that's something I enjoy very much, going out on the water a little bit. I don't have the gumption to become a boat owner and go through all of that process. I watch them go through repairs and challenges, and I'm like, wow, but I enjoy participating with the boating.
Well, I will put down in my calendar to give you a call next spring, and one of us can cross the Long Island Sound, and we'll play some golf together.
That would be great. Yeah, I actually with one friend, most Wednesdays we jump on a power boat about 11:30. We go over to Stamford. We go to a place called the Crab Shack.
Yeah.
We have lunch, and then we zip back, and I could be back in the office about 2:15 or so, and it really breaks the day up nice.
Yeah. That's neat. Very nice. So with all of the uncertainty that has been in existence now for, I guess, 18 months or so, how has that impacted internally your operations? And how has it impacted your ability to retain, what impact on revenue, if any, has it had?
Yeah, we've been fortunate and actually pleasantly surprised. We're going to have a record year, but I keep trying to analyze it and understand why. And I think what I've concluded is that the type of tax incentives that we offer have always been a good opportunity for many companies. But if I particularly talk about the R&D credit, there are lots of companies that, in my mind, should have been pursuing an R&D credit. But in normal times, often management would say, "Hey, sounds great, but I'm really busy right now. I don't have time." And certainly in the beginning of the pandemic, I think lots of people had more time, and they were available to listen, learn, have discussions, because we don't get engaged until there's some back and forth. We have to analyze their data and tell them what we think their savings is going to be and why, and it takes time. But business owners had time. The other thing I believe, I don't know that I could prove it, but I think there were many business owners that hadn't participated in government programs, and then going through the PPP loan process and some of the other pandemic-related tax incentives, I think opened them up to saying, wow, maybe I should have pursued government incentives before. I think they were much more oriented towards taking the time to learn and see how some of these things work. Now, in normal times, we would visit a company, which is the best way to get an understanding of exactly what's going on. And then we would on-site interview their technical people. We were prohibited from doing that for some clients. I mean, manufacturing in most cases was exempt, but even most of the manufacturing clients wanted limited visitors.
Right.
Would only have a skeleton staff. And the technology we're using right now, the Zoom technology, the Microsoft Teams, everybody embraced it.
Yeah.
We all got used to working with it. I find the technology to be amazing. And the fact that, a particular company might have 10 engineers working from home, it was easy to do our interviews, over Zoom or by Microsoft Teams. So our actual execution of projects became a lot easier and worked wonderfully.
Easier to get to the people who you needed the input from, right?
Yes, and just like we're doing, you can look the other person in the eye. You can have a conversation. It's really worked well. I have been amazed in terms of the initial impact, because most of the people who work in our firm are engineers. They are very process oriented. Our chief engineer, when the pandemic broke and we initially we all worked from home. Our team had us set up immediately where it was seamless. We could all go home, plug in our computers in our phones at home, and it was as if we were in the office. And then our team set up protocols in the office. No more than one person in the kitchen at a time. Use one hallway to go one direction, the other hallway to go the other direction. We were fortunate in that we had just taken much larger space, getting prepared for growth, that had big cubicles, and we were able to space all of our staff on every other cubicle. So the staff is all spread out, for those that are in cubicles. And this office has lots of perimeter offices. So all of our people with 10 or more years experience, we put in perimeter offices, and everybody else in effect got two cubicles, if you will. So we were fortunate.
So my next question is, obviously in your business, there is a tremendous amount of change, as is true probably for most businesses today. How do you stay up to date?
In our business, one needs to read. I also subscribe to sort of Peter Lynch when he was at Magellan Strategy. I think you need to manage by walking around. I think that you have to be observant of what's taking place, everywhere in business. I mean, if you see a cashier-less retailer, you have to understand, wow, this technology is coming in. If you go to a warehouse and you see more robots moving around, you have to start to get a better understanding of robot technology. We try to play a little bit of Wayne Gretzky, and we try to figure out where's the puck going? Where do we think innovation is going? So if we sense that artificial intelligence is really taking off, then we start to publish more articles about AI and learn about AI. And the same thing with virtual reality. Now, big push for us is life science. COVID has really put an attention on life sciences, health tech, med tech. So in our case, we're really digging into that area. We're sending our engineers to more and more industry seminars, webinars in the life science area. I mean, personally, I read Fast Company, I read Wired. I like the technology section of the Economist. But you have to read. Right now, I just got a copy of James Dyson's autobiography, the inventor of better vacuums, better hand dryers, actually fabulous biography. And then you learn about, what's going on in technology.
Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting when we first met was the amount of publishing that you do as a firm. And I suppose if I thought about it, because of your combined law degree and accounting degree, it's not unusual, but I think it is unusual for most firms and for most service firms. Tell our listeners a little bit about that process and that desire to get published in your firms.
Yes. We do not have a specific sales force. Our senior people that have been with the firm a long time are good on their feet. And when they meet a new potential client, they're excellent. But we do not have anyone dedicated to sales. We have a partnership model. So in order to get our name out there and demonstrate that we're subject matter experts, we write. We've probably regularly written articles for about 10 different publications. Some are in the building energy space because of our energy practice. Many are in the technology space. But one of the big items for us is 3D printing. We decided to dig into 3D printing a long time ago. And our team writes a daily blog for one of the leading 3D printing companies. It's called Fabaloo. Why? 3D printers are used either to create a new and improved product, or they're used to make a component that a company used to purchase from someone else. But in all cases, if you have a 3D printer and you're using it, you're entitled to an R&D credit. So for us, we see a great correlation. And we've watched it as we've spent the last 7 or 8 years writing a daily blog. We've actually watched 3D printing really take off in almost every industry that we're involved in that has a physical product. We have found it to be an excellent model. It takes a lot of work. I mean, we have to come up with topics. We have to assign staff to write them. And then we do have a woman who's an editor. So we try to get them in excellent shape before they get to the editor at Fabaloo, and he or she then puts some final touches on it. But it's also a way to stay abreast of things. If you're going to write about technology, it forces you to learn more about it.
Yeah. It was the back end of the answer to how do you stay up to date? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
So my final question is, most of the time we spend time working in our business. We do our work for our clients, so forth and so on. How much time do you spend, or conceptually, how do you approach working on your business to develop improvements? And you've referred to some of the things in passing as we've had some of this discussion today. But talk to us about how you work on your business.
Yeah, well, working on the business, first of all, our chief engineer, he's taught me how the importance of training. So I used to be guilty of hiring a person and sort of going through OJT, giving them a project and then seeing how it ferreted out. He does a very good job when we onboard someone. They go through some detailed training, and then it's continuous. In other words, then they work on projects, then they get more training, and I've come to appreciate the value of that. The other thing that I've been doing, I don't know if it's directly responsive to your question, but I know that young people today, it's challenging for them. I mean, their social interactions often are limited, with traditional things that I was used to, dating, going to clubs. So I'm trying to spend more time with our young people. I try at least once a week to take one of the engineers just for a one-on-one lunch and spend a little more time on how you doing, how's it going, because it's a whole different environment than whoever anticipated anything like this and what they're going through. I mean, we have to follow protocols. So if one of them calls us in the morning and says, I got a headache, I got a fever, I got this and that, well, they have to go get a COVID test. And it's, to me, it's challenging. I don't envy them. I mean, I think if you're a little older, you go home, you see your spouse, you watch some TV, and I think it's easier to cope than, because I don't think we have the same, need for the same type of socialization that young people normally would have. So. That's one thing I'm doing. I think what helps me there is I have three adult, young adult children. So I'm kind of watching what they're going through too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for sharing some time and letting us look into the business, look into the life of Charles Goulding, Mr. Mayor, and sharing your business with our listeners. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for setting this up, and I'm going to hold you to that boat trip next week and to that golf outing next year.
Yeah. Terrific. All right.
All
Thank you.
right. Thanks, Marty. Good. Bye-bye.